Hi all. Right, I can finally say it runs. Something I've been dying to say for, don't ask that question how long. No, that would be rude. It'd be like asking a woman's age. This is say a long time. I've had multiple problems to get to this stage. And this stage is literally the first link in the engine tuning. At this point, we've literally just got it cranking and running. So like coils, injectors, everything else now. Initial setup's done. But it has been not a nightmare, but it's been frustrating. I'm learning the M-Tune software from M-Tron. So, I've got that to deal with as well. And we've had some weird and wonderful problems which nobody's dealt with before. Like, what happens if you've got a lithium battery, Clive, and then you plug in the battery charger, the tender, to make sure that's topped up while you're trying to talk to the ECU? Turns out that puts some form of a voltage spike somehow, not quite sure how, that buggers up the LAN connection so my laptop couldn't speak to the ECU. Now, I didn't correlate the fact that the charger was on while I was doing it, but I kept plugging the charger in because it has a nice receptacle. I don't have to plug the whole thing in. I've got a simple plug disconnect, so I don't have to worry about lifting a bonnet or whatever else. And we have a simple plug like this that plugs into the outside of the car, so it makes it dead easy to charge up and make sure everything's on. I'm like a complete muppet. I didn't realise that was the problem with my network connection. And if you can't connect with the ECU with the laptop, that causes so much frustration. So we shall go through a few of the minor faults that I've created. So we've had to fix together as such, but realistically it was my fault. Turns out when me and my buddy wired the loom up, the crank trigger and the cam trigger are both three-pin plugs. We wired them both the same. Turns out the cam has to be wired, the two outer pins, which I think is reference for 5 volts, has to be wired the other way around. So had to remove all the front of the engine, of course, because I just can't get to the front of the motor to get to that plug, just to de-pin it and wire it correctly. So I had to strip all the front out, did that, okay, that's now done. The charge cooler now obviously is all bolted in and filled with water. So that's now full. Click in there. Can't really see it, but whatever. So all of the fluids now are in the vehicle. Okay, there's only water in the charge cooler at the moment, but once we've confirmed there's no leaks, eventually I will put a low concentration of glycol just to basically give the aluminium components a little bit of a nicer oily finish. So yes, all the fluids are. I do have one more fitting that's just started to weep. Bloody pain in the arse, the gearbox, but I've got a couple of aeromotive fittings coming for that. Then I'll dump the gearbox all out for a third time, change that fitting, and hopefully that'll cure all of the leaks. But everything's in. So yeah, right, cam and crank. So front one was wired 2 pins wrong way around. Okay, fine, that solved the crank. That solved the cam sync issue. Then we had a problem with the crank. And I kept trying to count the pulses. You can do a scope function on the ECU, and the pulses didn't make any sense. And the ECU wasn't very happy either, because I was telling it was an LS7 combination, and it didn't like that setup. So we went for a custom cam and crank setup, but it still didn't like it. What I was telling it was wrong. Turns out I was wrong. Turns out I didn't know the difference between a 24 reluctor and a 58 reluctor LS reluctor wheel that's welded to the crank. Now, backstory, I bought a Cali's custom crankshaft for this thing. It was not cheap, to say the least, but it was one of their ultralight units. So it's like, for the same stroke, if you did like an LS7 4-inch stroke GM crank to a Cali's, the Cali's is literally 15 pounds, so close on 7 kilos lighter than the original GM crank. So keep that weight down, you don't want that mass flying around. So it was a custom crank. Now we phoned them up and they had that one on the shelf. It's a 3.5-inch stroke because I wanted to reduce stroke, and we snapped it up because basically already had it, was already done. All we had to do was give them the bob weights, because Cali's, including in the price, they did at least balance the crank, because apparently you have to use heavy metal additive. It's a bit of a bitch to balance, so Cali's balanced it before us. Now The reluctor wheel that was on it, I didn't question what that reluctor wheel was. And when I looked at it, I thought, oh yeah, that's obviously a 58. It was not, it was a 24. Yes, 58 would have been slightly better, but to be honest, the differences really doesn't make a difference. There's like, 1,000 horsepower plus LS1s out there that have the 24, so it's just a question of not having the, well, whatever differences they are. So I was trying to program the ECU, telling it was a 58. It's not, it's a 24 tooth. Idiot. So once I realised that, I realised I've got the wrong sensor, because the sensor is specific to the particular tooth pattern. So the RHS block accepts both, so the actual block infrastructure is identical to the same, it's just the sensor needs to be slightly different. So I bought a, very generic, every LS from 97 to 2002 had that sensor, so luckily they're everywhere. So I changed that to a 24 tooth reluctor sensor. Now I've got no sync issues. That was the issues I had with the engine. That's all my fault. I'll put my hand up to that. No problem. So I went around, tried to get it running, and because of my interesting, obviously, inability to get to the timing marks, I had marked the flywheel with TDC. We put a dead stop into the plug hole, which basically the piston comes up and just touches, and then you mark whichever, front or back in this particular case, me with the flywheel, and then you reverse the engine up slowly with with a socket, which I can't do now because the engine's in. And basically you end up with 2 marks on the flywheel, and then dead in the middle of those 2 marks, the third point, that's your TDC. So I had the TDC marked on the flywheel, but it's through a tiny little bloody hole, which is awkward to see at the side of the gearbox, and trying to get the timing light in there to see it was just a nightmare. So what we did, we basically, because the engine's solidly mounted, I don't have to actually mount a timing pointer off the engine, I mounted it off the bottom of the chassis. You do have access to the underneath of the timing pulley, but only from underneath, and only when the belly pan's not on, because that aluminium guard you'll see there is a belly pan. So we put it on the lift. I set the flywheel to TDC, so the mark that was already aligned. We pushed it back on the lift, lifted up. I made a rudimentary timing pointer for the back there, painted them both with Tipex, they're white, and we checked all the, locked the ignition on 0 TDC as far as the ECU is concerned, turned off the injectors, turned off the, left the cores on, turned off the injectors, but locked the ECU at 0. And then we used the timing light to figure out that we're 22 degrees out from TDC to where the ECU thinks TDC is. So we put the offset in the ECU, so now the ECU knows exactly where top dead center is. And yes, then we had problems with the ECU connected to the laptop again. It's been a nightmare the last few days, and to be honest, I'm really glad that some buddies came around today. So Cyril and Daz, fucking A+ buddies. On my own, I would have been more frustrated. Sometimes with people around you, it does help that you don't storm out and just want to bang your head against the door. Having them around was definitely a help, massive help. So we tried to get through the issues, and Cyril then, because it looked very much like Evan, our tuner, basically said it looks like the power's fluctuating because the connection between the laptop and the ECU kept coming in and out. We were checking the power pins, checking everything else. Cyril thought, I wonder if it's the charger. And just unplugged the charger from the wall, immediately ping, laptop comes back on. So depending on how much power the remote charger was putting into the battery, it was causing a power spike somehow. Not quite sure exactly how, and basically the connection, the LAN connection or the Ethernet connection between the ECU wouldn't have. So now we finally think we've nailed that down. Turning off the Wi-Fi helped as well for some strange reason. Not quite sure what, but either way around, we can now speak to the ECU, or we have in the last few hours, so that's okay. Next step. They gave me a hand to take the rear clip off, because now the car is actually running. It's running on a really rough base file, and it has no clue where the tick over is. So the cylinder enrichment sitting about 0.85 lambda, which when it's cold, I'm sure it's fine. But trying to set up the throttle bodies to get the tick over down low was a bit awkward. And at one point it was sitting at 3,000 RPM, which is fine on its first startup because you want to throw some oil around, so I don't mind it sitting at 2.5 to 3. Listening to the guys, we built the Joe Gibbs racing engine, which we're using Joe Gibbs oil on this thing. I said it was a good idea for the first 10 minutes, even though it's not a flat tubby cam, it's a roller cam. It's good to have that RPM to make sure the oil's flowing everywhere anyway, and it doesn't do it any harm. So, yes, it starts. So I'll tag on that video to this video, and then I'll post it on YouTube so at least people can see. But we have the next box ticked. We now have the car running. We have the engine set up, and now basically it just needs a good engine tuner to basically chip in now and actually get to the point where we can start setting up the laptop stuff. So, yes, we won't divulge too much into that, but realistically, hopefully we'll get it on the dyno now in the next couple of weeks. I've got a couple of days to do some stuff to it. I have to tighten up the torque bolts for the stub shaft that goes through the wheels. I've got to do the torque settings in all of the drive shafts because we changed some bolts out that were the wrong spec. That's got to be done. Then I've got to do a four-wheel alignment because obviously the last thing you want to dyno is when the wheels are crabbing. I think this one's the worst. Yeah, you can see the wheels definitely crabbing this way. So we'll do a four-wheel alignment. That was never done. After we powder coated all the wishbones and stuff, we just basically assembled it. We'll do a height check just to make sure all the heights are right, dial the suspension in, at least roughly for the moment. We won't corner weight it quite yet because, well, I don't have any corner weight scales. But that is another thing on the list to buy. But yeah, so we're in the rough stage of setup, but it does fire, and here's the video of it running. And thanks for watching. If you've hung on this far, then you'll know that I'm ridiculously happy that it's now at least running. We need a little bit of tuning to calm the tick over down, so at least it makes it quasi drivable, and then we can drive it into the trailer and then drive it onto the dyno. So yes, anyway, I wax lyrical. Thanks again for the boys, and obviously before they left we took the rear clip off. Now I know we're in that stage. Obviously I don't really want the rear clip open on the dyno, so we've took the clip off. We've marked it on the hinges to make sure it goes back in exactly the right place. I can finalise bolting the body down and then do all the little bits and pieces. So hopefully tomorrow, maybe the next day, we should be almost ready to get this thing put on the dyno. Okay, a little bit longer video than normal, but yes, I'm kind of happy. We're getting close there. And before somebody asked me whether the exhaust valves are open on that video, I'm not too sure, to be totally honest. I think they're closing when they're opening and opening when they're closing. So I think technically that was the quiet side. And stood next to it, it doesn't sound that quiet. But stone cold, God, the throttle response is ridiculous. Like, I just blipped it a couple of times. You'll see in the video. I hardly touched the throttle, and it pinned straight away, and I'm like, oh geez, I've got to be careful. So yeah, I digress. Speak to you all soon. Next video on the dyno.